Buenos días. Iniciamos ahorita en unos minutitos más mientras las personas se conectan. Una vez más, muy buenos días y ahorita iniciamos, se están conectando más personas. Bueno, pues ahora sí, ya podemos comenzar. Antes de iniciar esta exploración, quiero informarles que tenemos acceso a traducción simultánea en inglés y en español. For English speakers, there's a simultaneous translation available. Y quien quiere escuchar la presentación solo en español, seleccione el botón de ese idioma. Y those of you who wish to listen to the presentation only in English, please press the English language button. Las personas que sean bilingües podrán seleccionar el canal del idioma en el que quieran escuchar el webinar o quedarse en el canal principal. Van a ver en la parte de abajo un circulito con tres puntitos. Si no les aparece ya el canal de interpretación allí con el mundito, vean el circulito con los tres puntitos, píquenle allí y allí les saldrá interpretation o interpretación. Entonces ahí ya se les pondrá el botoncito abajo. La introducción va a ser en español, la presentación principal va a ser en inglés y la sesión del panel será también en inglés. Y bueno, ahora sí, ya damos inicio concretamente al panel. De parte de BFA Global, les damos la más cordial bienvenida a todas y todos los que nos acompañan el día de hoy a esta sexta y última edición de las exploraciones del programa Strive México, que es apoyado por el Centro para el Crecimiento Inclusivo de Mastercard. En esta exploración vamos a presentar evidencia de los impactos que tiene la adopción de pagos digitales en los pequeños comercios. Y como ya muchos de ustedes saben, a lo largo del programa Strive México, las exploraciones han tenido el propósito de compartir con actores del ecosistema los resultados de investigaciones de vanguardia, como esta, sobre la digitalización de pequeñas empresas. Y estas investigaciones, pues muy frecuentemente tienen nula o poca difusión en México y en América Latina, y es por eso que las hemos promovido a través de este foro. En el transcurso del evento pueden hacer sus preguntas y dejar sus comentarios en cualquiera de los dos idiomas en el chat. Y ahora, entrando en materia, le quiero dar la bienvenida a Shreya Kankanhali, quien actualmente es profesora adjunta de Mercadeo en la Facultad de Negocios de la Universidad de Cornell, luego de haber concluido su doctorado en la Escuela de Negocios de la Universidad de Stanford. Su investigación se ha enfocado en el crecimiento de las pequeñas empresas en economías en desarrollo, y ella fue quien dirigió el proyecto de investigación sobre la aceptación y el impacto de los pagos digitales en comercios minoristas en México, que es el tema de esta exploración. Para el panel nos acompañará también Irina Balassi, quien es vicepresidente de Customer Solutions Center North LAC Mastercard. Y Irina es una banquera con más de 20 años de experiencia global, liderando equipos para diseñar, implementar y optimizar soluciones digitales innovadoras y disruptivas. Bienvenida, Irina, y nos volvemos a ver después de la presentación. Y bueno, ahora, sin más preámbulo, le cedo la palabra a Shreya. Shreya, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you to BFA, Strive Mexico, and MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth for this opportunity to share my research on payment digitization policies and retailer performance. So today I'll be presenting the results from a large-scale, multi-year field experiment with over 800 retailers, where we examined the impact of policies to drive the acceptance of these retailers of digital payments. I'll start with the motivation for this study. So the motivation for this study, as many of you know, comes from the observation that Mexican retail markets are really a cash-dominated world. Within these retail markets, it's particularly traditional small-scale retailers that do not accept digital payments, while the more modern retailers, like the 7-Eleven pictured here, do. And even post-COVID, the vast majority of retail transactions, although COVID brought about a shift here, still the vast majority of retail transactions, including large transactions over 500 pesos, were done in cash, according to census data. Now, various governmental and industry stakeholders are investing in the orders of hundreds of millions of dollars, billions in aggregate, to bring small retailers like the ones I showed you in the previous slide into the digital payment ecosystem. And there are multiple reasons or objectives behind their investments. First, to bring formality, transparency, and visibility to the retail sector. And second, from a commercial point of view, these businesses can really serve as the next growth frontier in developing economies for financial services companies. But perhaps most importantly, among these policy and industry stakeholders, there's a strong belief in the benefits of payment digitization for retailers. And I'm sure that even in this audience, it's widely held among us that digitization must bring benefits. And as a result of this, we observe investments in costly interventions. The ones that we study in this field experiment vary from $580 to $670 per firm, under the assumption that there's going to be a positive ROI. But if we look at the actual evidence on the ground on the benefits of payment digitization, looking for rigorous causal evidence here, the picture is actually very murky. There's only one other RCT or field experiment, to the best of my knowledge, which was conducted in Kenya that showed improved access to credit lines through their mobile money technology M-Pesa. But there were null effects on performance outcomes overall. And if you've actually interacted with or talked to a retailer on the ground, you'll find that there's a great deal of skepticism or even pessimism on the benefits of payment digitization. So let's examine from the retailer's perspective the choice of whether or not to accept digital payments. So on the cost side, there are multiple costs that can come to mind that are actually very salient for the retailer. Aside from the fixed cost of the technology itself, if all the technology does is cannibalize their cash sales, the merchant fee can then ultimately cut into profit margins. Additionally, I think we're all well aware that these retailers worry a lot about formality costs that can arise from their sales becoming digitally recorded. On the other hand, on the benefit side, it's a lot more uncertain for reasons that we can dig into. So while there are possibilities of attracting new customers and growing basket size by alleviating liquidity constraints for shoppers that come into the store, that's possible. And in addition, it's possible that digital payments will allow you to accumulate capital and potentially invest in growing your business. But all of these benefits rely on the fact of the technology actually getting used. And this may actually be very uncertain from the retailer's perspective, given that only 1 in 3 adults have payment cards. And they likely have selected into shopping at these more modern retailers. So it's unclear or uncertain whether, as a retailer, you could actually draw these customers to switch from the modern retailers that they shop at, and or convert your existing consumers to use digital payments. And so this tension of cost versus benefit motivates our study and its research question. We ask, what is the effect of accepting digital payments on traditional retail performance? Particularly, we're interested in revenue and profitability. And we care about this in the context of cash-dominated developing economies like Mexico. And then secondly, we ask for any business improvement, what are the underlying mechanisms? So why might we see performance improvements? Our empirical approach involves designing and executing a field experiment in Guadalajara with 845 cash-only firms at baseline. And we're going to randomly assign these retailers to either receive treatments or be in the control group. So 75% of our sample is given a treatment, which is a heavy intervention to adopt a card reader and payment processing smartphone application. And then 25% are assigned to a control group where they get no support for adopting any digital payment technology. We then subsequently measure the performance outcomes for both treatment retailers and control group retailers in the long term. And here we have a fairly long-term approach of going 24 months out post-baseline. So to preview our findings, we reassuringly find positive and economically large effects of adopting digital payments on business performance. So particularly, we see sales increases in the order of 30 to 40%, benchmarked against the control group, while profits grow in the order of 40 to 50%. Additionally, we find that the performance gains occur through two main channels. First, it helps the firm attract valuable digitally connected customer segments. Specifically, they experience growth with youth, professionals, tourists, as well as higher income consumers. We also find that they use new digital tools to reach and attract these customers, as well as engage with them. Second, we find that accepting digital payments allows retailers to accumulate working capital. Specifically, they avoid leakages, such as due to theft and diversions, to save more, and they're also able to access better financing options. And what this does is it enables productive business investments across a range of investment outcomes, such as upgrading your store premise, as well as purchasing more stock and materials. Now, I'll detail the experiment that we conducted. So the first question you might have is, who are the businesses in the experiment sample? What we did to recruit our sample is we went door to door in all commercial areas of the city to recruit. We first noted all eligible firms and then approached them to assess interest in program participation. And so we purposefully sample established firms to get firms who really account for a substantial volume of retail sales in the city. And we also, through this interest criteria, get those that were not fully closed off to adoption. So while they might be a bit skeptical, they're still somewhat open to adoption. While this might cause some sort of selection into the sample, this also gives ecological validity, as this would be the natural next target for either policy interventions or industry stakeholders to approach, as opposed to the kinds of firms who are entirely closed off to the possibility of adoption. That said, we're able to recruit a sample that is fairly representative of the small business environment in the city. First, you'll notice from the map on the left side of the slide that we have comprehensive geographic coverage. Second, the sample consists of about 1.6% of all retail businesses in the municipality, which just signifies the scale of our study. And third, per census data, our sample closely matches population means on key business characteristics over the same period. So in employee sales and gross margin, we're fairly representative of nationally retailers with 0 to 10 employees. Now I'll talk about the intervention. So our main intervention, which all treatment firms get, involves 100% subsidy on this fintech solution, which consists of a card reader and the smartphone application, as well as a full B2B onboarding service over 2 visits. We hired and sent service staff to retailers to provide the onboarding support. What they do is they deliver the fintech solution to the retailer. And in the first visit, they attempt to provide a standardized onboarding service where they set up the technology and train the business owner as well as any relevant staff in its use. And then in the second visit, they provide customized support for any challenges that came up that was unique to the retailer. So you can think of this really as troubleshooting support. Additionally, subsets of this group, so 75% of our sample got this tech intervention, and then further subsets of them additionally got interventions to push their usage in the short term post onboarding. So 2/3 got support with marketing payments to customers, and then a further 1/3 got a 4-month waiver on the merchant fee that they would have to pay. So let me tell you a bit about what this marketing support involved that 2/3 got. The marketing support occurred right after the onboarding intervention, sequentially, and the hope was both to reveal and create customer demand for digital payments. At the time, data indicated that about 1 in 4, 1 in 3 Mexicans had debit cards, but they were not all necessarily in the practice of using it at the store directly. And our hope was to start encouraging this practice. So the intervention consisted of giving the retailers an advertising kit and visiting them 8 times to assist in marketing. And these are the components of the advertising kit. So what you see is an open and closed sign, an outdoor totem, a point of sale stand, and a poster for the store interior. Next, we see the action plan for the 8 visits. So the key components here include installing the advertising kit, helping the owner give a pitch to customers to pay with cards, and then implementing strategies. Finally, the third intervention was a 4-month waiver on the merchant fee or commissions. This was implemented during the onboarding process, so it came into action immediately. And I'll note at this stage that all the 3 interventions bundled together. So if you got the technology intervention, the marketing intervention, and this free trial intervention, that would cost the policymaker $670. Okay. So that was what happened with 75% of the treatment groups. And next, I'll talk about the control group. So the control group was a random 25% of the sample, and no support was offered to them. They were able to adopt the technology on their own. And so the market conditions was that the technology is widely available, and it was inexpensive at about $10, which is 10% of monthly revenue, even in the bottom first percentile. So this is what the control group was exposed to. Now let's come on to the main effects of our interventions, which I'm very excited to share. So these come from survey data collection that we ran in the field 24 months after baseline. One thing to note is that we had very little attrition in our sample. So we were able to follow up with 93% of business owners in both the treatment groups as well as the control group for the survey 2 years later. So first, I'll talk about the sales effect. We note a large and statistically significant effect on monthly sales. The control group averaged monthly sales of about 28,000 pesos, while the 3 treatment groups made an additional 8,600 to 11,367 pesos additionally per month, representing a 30 to 40% increase in sales. We also estimate large and statistically significant effects on monthly profits. The control group averaged monthly profits of roughly 6,780 pesos, while the 3 treatment groups made an additional 2,500 to 3,500 pesos, representing a 37 to 51% increase in profitability. These are very large increases. In US dollar terms, you can really think of this as an additional $150 a month, which is very noticeable in people's pocketbooks. So I've also plotted two charts here and in the subsequent slide to show you statistically that these effects are not just coming from a very few large or small firms in the sample. We see that changes occur across the board. So in this chart pictured, we have the control group in blue and treatment groups in red, and we plot the distribution of their change in sales. And the clear thing to take away is that there's this even separation between the two lines, regardless of the values or the size of the firms. So what that means is the effects that I just described are not due to something strange going on in one part of the firm size distribution. And the same applies to profits growth as well. So it's very even across small firms and large firms that we see this separation emerging between treatment and control firms. Now, in the final part of the presentation, I want to dig in a bit more into the mechanisms to understand why these sales and profits gains could have occurred. So first, two of the three treatment groups, so those that obtained the marketing intervention, reported that they had grown with customers. On a scale out of 11, so 1 to 11 scale, where each scale point represents a percentage increase in consumers, they had grown by one scale point, which is roughly a 25% increase. We were then curious to note whether there were particular types of customers that these two groups had grown with. And so we measure whether they grew with 10 segments. 6 out of these 10 segments were more digitally connected, and these are in orange. They include office workers, youth, the middle class, upper class, tourists, as well as Valus card holders. And then the 4 out of 10 of these segments, they were not more digitally connected. So this consists of middle-aged individuals, seniors and retirees, lower or potentially working class individuals, as well as neighbors. And so we measured these segments almost as a placebo check, as we were not expecting growth with these types of segments. We found very much then, according to our predictions, that the businesses grew with digitally connected customer segments and not with the placebo segment. So particularly, they grew with youth, professionals, higher social economic status, tourists, and Valus cardholders, but not with middle-aged individuals, senior individuals, or lower income workers. You can see this in this chart where it's normalized against zero, zero being the control group, that there were increases in the orange segments, but not significant increases in the gray segments. Additionally, as these businesses were growing with digitally connected consumers, we were curious whether they were becoming more adept at using other digital tools. So not just the payment technology. The technology or the payment technology in some sense could serve as a Trojan horse, opening up firms to a wider set of digital tools. So we've rated businesses out of 10 on their use of 8 other digital tools: WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Google Search, Google Maps, online posting product menus online, providing ordering online, as well as delivery and pickup services online. And what we find is that, interestingly, there's significant effects of the first two treatments on the usage of these digital tools, while the third is also positive, but not statistically significant, even though the sign is in the right direction. So we're not going to emphasize these results too heavily, though it could suggest that the additional financial incentive of the free trial or the waiver, it might have caused retailers to be more narrowly focused on the payment technology rather than expand more broadly to other technologies. Finally, we also see evidence consistent with the newer consumers being bigger spenders. As the average basket or spend per customer grew. So this could also come from existing customers as well. But essentially what this chart demonstrates is that relative to the control group, treated customers or treated groups grew with their spend per customer or basket size. Thus, this mechanism points to accessing a new set of customers, enhancing their digital outreach, and obtaining greater in-store spend. Other than the growth through these external or more customer-driven channels, we wondered whether any of the sales or profits gain could be explained by the more internal mechanisms of accumulating capital. Particularly, we wanted to investigate whether digital transactions being directly siphoned to a bank account could reduce leakages and diversions, prevent sales losses due to a lack of payment options such as buy now and pay later or months of installments, and whether it could prevent poor customer credit management, as the payment technology that we gave them had a tool to manage customer credit. We were also curious whether it would lead to more banking service usage, particularly greater savings account usage, and access to credit from more formal sources. So we asked businesses to report whether they had engaged in any of those 6 practices and activities, providing text responses as well as examples to the auditor of whether they had engaged in those practices. And then we then had an expert come in and rate them, and they were blind to their treatment status. And so they provided ratings on how well they performed along those practices. And we find that relative to the control group, which is normalized to 0 in these charts, that treated businesses were much more likely to have engaged in these practices effectively, contributing to a greater accumulation of working capital. So you'll see that in the bars in orange, where normalized relative to the control group, there was growth in or there was an increase in their capital accumulation or capital growth index, which was scored from 1 to 10. We also test this hypothesis on capital accumulation in a different way. We presume that if firms are accumulating more working capital, they should be able to invest in their business more too. So we measure investments in various categories, from upgrading the business premise to purchasing more materials. And we find that treated firms invested more than the control group across these various dimensions. So in terms of annual investments, we found that the count of their annual investments had increased by about 0.25 over here. And so I'll end the presentation with conclusions. Yep. First, it's very clear that these payment digitization policies are cost effective. So while firms can digitize quite cheaply on their own, as I described with the control group, they could buy these products, many of them still don't. And there's still an ROI to policymakers of investing in the space to push digitization. The investment of $669 per firm, given the profit increase that we see, could be recovered within 6 months. And additionally, we think that the private sector as well as the public sector can credibly communicate these benefits or this ROI to retailers so that they understand the gains from adoption. Second, payment digitization helps with diversification and growth of customers. So our results suggest that accepting digital payments can be a strategic tool to getting these more lucrative types of consumers. And then finally, we see that payment digitization has broader spillovers to financial inclusion more generally. Businesses who received the treatments became more integrated with banking systems, and this brought them benefits. They could save more and make productive investments for their business. And on this hopeful note, I'd like to thank you all for your time and look forward to having a robust discussion as well as question and answer session on the study.
Shreya, thank you very much for this super interesting presentation. This second round of findings that build on the previous ones you presented earlier this year are highly relevant, I think, to everyone involved in the payments space as it relates to small businesses in Mexico. So congratulations on this great effort and this second round of research. I would now like to invite MasterCard's Irina Valasi to join this conversation to share her broad knowledge and expertise on disruptive payment technologies as well. Um, and everyone, please ask your questions or leave comments in the chat. So,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you, Irina. Welcome.
Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning. How are you?
Fine, fine. We're doing
Happy to
well.
be here.
Good, good. We're grateful for your time. And I'd like to start with one question that was asked in the audience. And Shreya, it would be helpful to highlight how this data set is different to the one you presented previously, because in the last webinar, you focused more on the experiments and how they worked. And on this time, you focused more
Yeah.
on and the data set was different, right? I mean, the first one was 400
So
and
so let me clarify that. Yes. So in the previous webinar, we had looked at a subset of this data, particularly that was 479 firms. That was just those who were in the control group or had been offered the technology intervention or the technology and marketing intervention. And there, the goal of that study was to look at the differences between those who had been offered the marketing intervention versus the technology intervention in terms of short-term adoption of digital payment technology. And there, our outcome was just to see, do the interventions that we provided drive adoption? We found that they do, and particularly the marketing intervention, at least in the short term, drove greater adoption as well as usage of the digital payment technology. In this, we include our additional treatment group as well as a pilot batch that was reinforced with these interventions. And so it's a fuller data set. And here, what we find ultimately is that the three interventions don't really have significant differences between them in terms of long run outcomes. So this is a statistical point around we can't really distinguish between the technology versus the technology and marketing versus the technology, marketing, and free trial. They all seem to have very similar large impacts relative to the control group, which is why you'll see in a lot of this webinar, they're combined together, at least either in the discussion or in the analysis.
great. Well, this leads me to the next question, since the study found these statistically significant improvements in both sales and profitability, as you highlighted, which
Mhm.
resulted from digital payment adoption. Now, were there specific types of retailers or market segments that benefited most, or do you see these benefits like broadly applicable, like across the board? Um,
That's a great question that we are exploring extensively. So I'll share preliminary results on what we find. So we explore many dimensions of differences between retailers, such as gender, for example, female-owned enterprises versus male-owned. We explore dimensions such as education, age, um, as well as digital practices at baseline. So, how digitally savvy were they prior to the intervention? And we don't find that any of those demographic characteristics affect how much they benefited from the treatment. So, in that sense, the sales and profits gains were more broad-based. However, we do find one very important variable that drives differences in how big this gain was, and that is actually the demand side. So we measure essentially how digitized the neighborhood is. We come up with a proxy measure of that based on how many firms overall were accepting digital payments, and we find that in these neighborhoods that are very digitally connected, the businesses benefit more.
okay.
So it's sort of concentrated in markets where there's some sort of critical mass of digital technologies, and I think that also makes this policy point or implication that without these sort of policy interventions, we might be leaving behind markets where digitization hasn't taken hold. And so that might be a new kind of focus area going forward.
Right. Because you need both, right? You need businesses accepting digital payments, but you also need customers
Yes,
who have the means to be able to make those digital payments, right?
exactly.
And Irina, now let me turn to you. As the study showed, like one of the benefits of accepting digital payments for small retailers was the ability to reach new customer segments. So can you, from your experience, can you elaborate on the kinds of customers that retailers are able to attract and how their buying behavior differs from that of cash customers? Shreya made some reference to the type of customers that were more attracted by these businesses, but in your experience, what tends to be the match?
Yes, thank you. Well, as you said, digital payments now help small retailers to tap into new segments, and obviously, this help also to improve satisfaction on their clients and adapt and change, no, as the digital world is changing. No, if they are already in the technology, they can change more rapidly. I think that we already saw it in the studio. Young population is the one that is more likely to use digital payments. They are born with a cell phone in their hands, no, with a smartphone in their hands, and they are more likely to change their behavior, no, using cash to using digital payments. Obvious also the tech savvy people that has proved the technology in different kind of journeys, no, not only in an POS as we have already seen in this studio. Digital goes beyond, no, e-commerce, sending things, crossing barriers, no. They, all these people that are used to the technology and are used to buying online, obviously are more likely to use this kind of technology in these small stores, no, it's SMEs. And why do they use it? Because they like the convenience and the security, no, and also they increase their spend, as we saw in the study, because they don't need the cash, they don't need to go to ATM, no, they have it here, and they like the experience. And obviously the theory says also that people that use this kind of technology, for example, contactless in a POS payment or an e-commerce transaction, and get a very good journey and satisfaction on the experience, with 3 times that they use this.
Right. I stopped hearing Irina.
Yeah, me
Are you?
too.
Yeah.
Me as well.
Oh, Irina, sorry, we lost you.
Do you hear me there?
Yeah, now we
Yes.
hear you.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, and the last thing that I wanted to say is, for example, you can also go to clients that have mobility problems. No, you can obviously address that kind of people also. No, you can buy things online. No, and these kind of people can sell them things to them. No, so you have a lot of type of new clients that you can go with.
Right. And well, just to continue the conversation with you, beyond the initial marketing support, and this relates to a question that Juan Navarrete just made. I think it relates to it, Juan. Beyond this initial marketing support that was provided in Shreya's experiment to encourage digital payments, how do you see technology being leveraged in the future that could lower the costs of these marketing interventions while getting the same outcomes?
Well, you hear me now? Yes.
We can.
Okay. Sorry. Well, we are in a very special area now, with all the in artificial intelligence that we have, no, disposable at our disposal now. and the machine learning tools, no, we can create these marketing cost-effective campaigns for SMEs, not to select the right audiences and reduce costs and reduce waste of time and money. All these AI that it's now with the chatbots can help us not to people, so we can answer questions, help them with claims, no, get information about the store, the products, or everything that they are selling, no, and help people to engage in a conversation so that they can be and create this loyalty with the clients, no. Also, a lot of people, more than 77% in the population have smartphones, no, 40% have computers, and there are AI tools powered there that they can use for social media content, for blogs, for newsletters, no, and they can create this proximity with the clients. And all these efforts obviously helps to build strategies with a cost-effective and get a broader and much larger audiences with the right people with less costs. And obviously all the clients, no, the cardholders that we have interviewed says 3 out of 4 of them says that if they receive personalized information, they are more likely to buy in the store, to recommend the store, or to return and buy again. No, so we have the tools, we have the technology, but we need to understand it, no, and begin to look for the options that a small and scale, smaller small business can access to that a bigger one, no. But the technology is here. We need to look for it, no.
Right. No, that's a good point, and this is something that can be leveraged in the future, because this relates to another question that Juan Navarrete asked. Is there any insight regarding the unit cost of the intervention in each of the treatments? In other words, he says, how much would a digital payment aggregator need to invest per shop to achieve a smooth, full adoption of the tool? Right now, the investment was upwards of $600 for the full intervention. I guess on average, I don't know if there were different costs related to each of the interventions, but I guess linking it to what Irina was saying before, how do we leverage technology as well to lower those costs for aggregators or others? It could be governments that are pushing or promoting acceptance, digital payment acceptance, right? As well.
I don't know about the costs, no. So Shara can
Yeah, I can share
complement
my
it.
thoughts on that, but go for it, Irina, first, if there's
No,
anything
the
you'd
thing
like
that
to.
I wanted to say is that these kind of changes that we want to make in Mexico and in the world needs to be in partnership, no. So as you were saying, Gabriela, no, if you have a partner like Strive, no, and the government of Guadalajara, of Querétaro, of whatever, we have different kind of examples that I can bring and I can share with you, no, and an aggregator, no, and someone to give them an account. You can build an ecosystem that can lower costs and be more accessible for everyone, no.
Yeah. So I think this question around cost is one of the most frequently asked, and it's an incredibly important a question. So we went with heavy touch interventions because when we rolled out these studies, initially this was starting around 2019, and then over the course of the pandemic, we noticed that it was really difficult, even in the segment, to get retailers to adopt the technology. It was very, very difficult. There were a lot of technical issues as well as a lot of skepticism to overcome with the retailer. And that required that personal trust and credibility, and that heavy touch element to it. Now, we still find that even with these costly interventions, so you're right, that the basic intervention was about $585, could go up to 670 when we included the marketing as well as the free trial. Now the free trial is very cheap, but the marketing intervention is what cost an additional 70 to 80 US dollars. So that's to your unit cost question. There's still a return with that. You still can recover that investment. The profit gain is large enough that within a very reasonable horizon you can recover it. But understandably, it's very natural to focus on, can we lower these costs through digital? Maybe the entirely digital route, we're not there yet, possibly because these businesses are, at least on the ground, they have a couple of digital tools that they're really familiar and they really like WhatsApp and Facebook, but they're not broadly more digitally connected. And so you can envision almost like a hybrid, lower cost tech and touch, where perhaps the initial inroad or the initial invite is made in person, but then subsequently the intervention translates into a more uh, digitally digital delivery mechanism, kind of what Irina was describing with, Gen AI and chatbots, and that can still give you that personalized help and personalized communication. So perhaps the next step is in the more hybrid direction, which already I could imagine lowers costs considerably.
I mean, in many of our projects, we have seen that many of these types of businesses, particularly women-owned businesses in these sort of socioeconomic segments as well, they do require more touch to accompany the tech. And there may come a day when, the tech overtakes the touch, but initially, at least for onboarding and getting the ease of use and learning how to use the technology, it requires more high touch, which I guess is something really interesting to follow. And the value, I think, of this research is that it shows the cost of these things and the impact of these things. So thus the importance of continuing to fund research that can inform public and private sector initiatives to drive something forward. In this case, the adoption of digital payments, both by the businesses and then encouraging the usage of cards in the hands of people. I mean, we know that in Mexico, not everybody's banked, not everyone has a bank account or a card to be able to make those payments. But if that wave of financial inclusion continues to be encouraged, as well as the digital payment acceptance, then the two can come together. But this kind of research, I think, is super valuable because not all shops are created equal, and many of these micro enterprises are lower income, less digitized, and whatever. So there's more challenges to be overcome, and some of those costs are likely to go down, but more slowly than with bigger businesses. And Shreya, going back to the question that I had asked before, did you see any differences in uptake and usage between women-owned businesses and male-owned businesses, or you didn't go that deep into?
We checked that and we didn't find any differences between women and men. But now that you mentioned this question around who, or this discussion around who engaged more with the intervention, and where did we see, at least in the short term, greater usage? There were effects with the digital generation, right? And I think this comes to Irina's point about those born with the smartphone. So when we cut the data by millennials and Gen Z, we found that they were much more likely to receive the intervention as well as adopt at higher rates. Yeah.
Okay, and adopt quicker. Maybe fewer visits were necessary, or
So we standardized the visits, but the engagement was higher and the stickiness was higher. And so maybe that's the demographic to think about when we consider translating these interventions to more digitally oriented.
Yeah, go deeper into those differences to be able to personalize that better, maybe. And as more
Yeah.
digital tools become available, they should also be tailored to the needs of the particular businesses, maybe segmented by age or education or level of
Mhm.
digitization that they already use. Because I'm sure that if you go deeper, you can sub-segment a lot more and find certain
Mhm.
different between those businesses. But anyhow, I mean, this research is super
No,
interesting.
that's yeah,
Yeah,
that's a clear next step, because one thing we would like to explore is like the interaction. So we've looked at education, we've looked at age, we've looked at gender, but it would be further interesting to see like is there a difference between younger women versus older women, and like the
right.
subsegments within these, to your point.
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, many projects, the government projects as well launch initiatives, but then they don't have funding for the research. So thus the value of the research that you did initially with the program and then through your own experiments, because it really informs policy and other, as I said, public and private sector initiatives. And Irina, turning to you, do you know of any successful models or partnerships between fintech companies and private sector stakeholders to support small scale retailers in transitioning to digital payments that
Yes,
you
yes.
believe scaled in markets that are maybe similar to Guadalajara's? Because Guadalajara, Monterrey, Mexico City, I mean, these are densely populated areas, and there are many other big cities in Mexico, but what example
Yes,
do you know?
we have some examples that we have been working on. For example, we have a collaboration with the Querétaro's Minister of Tourism, no? And we provide this digital program to them to focus on artisans that work in the tourism sector, no? And this digital program is with Bill Pocket, no? It's another alliance that we have, and giving them an MPOS, no? And also tutoring, because as you were saying, now we were discussing, and the studio says, if you only leave the technology, it doesn't thrive, no? So this kind of effort has the two things, no, the technology and the tutoring, no. This is around ocho pueblos mágicos, the 8 magic towns around Querétaro, and we have like 150 people that have already took this package, this program, and 41 artisans that are involved in that. No, so it's going there, it's going well, and we are doing that effort. No, we have other kind of alliances that help us to thrive this. For example, we have one collaboration with Finsus, that is another fintech. Finsus is focused on communities with less than 15,000 people, no? So they can help them get into the digital world. And they are including in their app, no, our content of financial health and tutoring also to help them with this goal that Finsus has. No, so that's another line that we are working with them. Another alliance that we have is with Mercado Libre, no, and with Mercado Libre we are focused more on SMEs, no, to help them with this behavioral scoring, alternative scoring of risk credit, no, so they can unlock the credit to SME clients, and we are working with them, and they have made a lot of studies and results, obviously, because we are advancing on that side. And also another example that it's not a fintech, but it's a great ally is Banbajío is the first bank that have a collaboration with Stripe, and they are helping us to get to get their clients in touch with technology, not to help obviously them to know about it, to be aware, and to adopt and create usage of that. No, so we can make a lot of collaborations. As I said, it's an ecosystem. No, more partners that we can reach and more collaborations that we can make, we can growth. No, in our goal. No, that is inclusive growth.
And how do you see this research making its way to your partners? Like, do you plan to share it? How do you plan to use this research going forward, because we wouldn't want this research to stay on the shelf and, just having shared it here. And it's so
Oh,
insightful.
it's so insightful, and obviously has a lot of information that can help us convince more partners to firm collaborations with us, no, and to grow in that side. We have, as a Stripe, we have already 17 partners, but this is not enough, no. We as a Stripe have a goal of 400,000 digitized SMEs to 2025. We have 150, but we are lacking of more partnership to grow. So these kind of studies help us, no, to convince and to demonstrate the partners, no, and obviously our final clients that technology has results directly into profitability and growth, no, and have a better life, no, growing SMEs and help the cardholders that are using that SMEs and products to thrive. So we have these kind of studies to make tangible the results of digitalization. No?
Yeah.
No, that's
And
that's
I
yeah, yeah,
just
sure.
wanted to add one thing. This is like the beginning of the dissemination journey. So, both in academic circles, but I think sometimes even more importantly in these types of both policy and industry circles, um, we want to disseminate these as widely as possible. And so, if anyone in the webinar has ideas on this, um, of course, I would be very happy to hear from you because yeah, I think I went into this research not being skeptical, but just wondering to what extent would we even find effects? Would we even see positive effects? And I was struck by the magnitude of what we found. And I think it's important to disseminate because as we see on the ground, there's still a great deal of skepticism um, around at least from the retailers on like, oh well, if I adopt this, like nobody's going to use it. And so that's a very important part of dissemination. And I see there's another question: is the World Bank interested in advancing these issues given your results? Yes, absolutely. So one of the authors of the study is involved with the World Bank, and I know it's like going forward, payment digitization is something that they're um, strongly wanting to invest in. There's a lot that can be done in terms of I believe this was a question asked earlier at the aggregate national level too. Like if you think about major policies like demonetization or in Mexico, I believe with Progresa they started issuing the payments with debit cards. There's a lot that can be done both on the consumer side and the firm side.
Absolutely. And I think this can definitely inform policymakers and aggregators as well. I mean, those who are trying to onboard all these businesses into the payment space. And if we do it in tandem with financial inclusion, putting accounts in the hands of people who find use cases for those accounts. And one of those use cases would be being able to make payments digitally. So we're definitely on board to helping you disseminate this great work, because I think it'll be very useful, as you said at the beginning, for institutions who are working on this to be able to provide some proof, some very digestible proof, maybe a sort of infographic or something that provides the proof that these can actually work for the businesses better. I mean, those that are reticent to adopt payments. And we've unfortunately come to the end of the webinar, but before concluding, I want to inform everyone here that you can download the infographics of all the previous explorations that we have done, including the previous one that Shreya presented. And you can also access all the materials of the Strive Mexico program that were produced by BFA Global, including the recordings of the presentations that we have done. You will be able to find the recording of this presentation there too, and they're accessible in both Spanish and in English. And well, I could have continued this conversation with you guys much further, but it has been a great pleasure to chat with both of you here today. Shreya, thank you so much for making the time to put together this presentation and share your research with us. And pues ahora sí cambio a español. A nombre del programa Strive México de BFA Global, les agradecemos muchísimo su participación y también les agradecemos a todas y a todos ustedes el habernos acompañado el día de hoy en esta última exploración del programa Strive México. Ojalá que esta temática haya sido de su interés. Y al salir del Zoom les va a aparecer una pequeñísima encuesta que les pedimos por favor que nos respondan. Nos dará mucho gusto y les deseo a todas y a todos un excelente día. Hasta luego.
Gracias.
Thank you so much, Gabriela.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Bye.
Bye,
And thanks to
everyone.
the audience. Bye.